Hi, today we're going to work on this bicycle's bottom bracket. To do that, we're going to have to remove the cotter pin crank. A bottom bracket, pictured here, is what bears the stress of when you pedal. The crank arms transfer the force from your feet at the pedals to the bottom bracket. In this instance, the pedal arms are wobbling when pressure is exerted on the pedals. Do you see how I can move this silver part of the bike horizontally, independent of the bike's frame? That is something that needs to be adjusted. To really do this properly, you will require one of these, a cotter pin press. Most of the established tool makers ceased manufacture of these some years ago because cotter pin bikes are mostly out of production. However, Bikesmith Design still manufactures ones exactly like this for around $70. Ideally, you will have one of these, a 19-inch wrench, a little bit of grease or lubricant, a 10mm wrench, a bottom bracket pin tool, and a lock ring tool. Now to start off, we're going to use a 10mm wrench to loosen the threaded side of the cotter pin. This unscrews in the usual way. Turn it to the left to remove it. Once the bolt and washer have been removed, apply some oil or grease to the tip of the cotter pin's threaded side. A cotter pin press operates as the name implies. The tool presses the pin out of its hole. The lubricant helps prevent friction damage between the two surfaces. Line up the cotter pin press's hollow side with the cotter pin's thicker end. Then screw to the right. Some pressure must be exerted to push the cotter pin out of the crank. When the cotter pin is loose and you are no longer feeling resistance, or if you can no longer turn the cotter pin press because it has hit the crank's arm, stop applying pressure. You should be able to pull the cotter pin out with your hand. Now that the bolt is out, remove the arm. I didn't have a lock ring tool handy, so I used a rag and channel locks as a workaround. Channel locks are easy to use, and the rag prevents any damage to the lock ring or to the frame's paint. Line up whichever tool you are using with the lock ring and unscrew it by turning it to the left. Now we are going to use the spanner. This tool has little notches at 90 degrees that go into the tiny holes you see on top of the axle here. As you can tell by how easily I'm moving this back and forth, this is very loose. Turn it to the right to tighten it back down. You know you have reached a proper adjustment when the crank does not feel like it is clicking from side to side, but you can still turn the crank. Put the lock ring back onto the bicycle. When you are sure of your adjustment, you want to really tighten it back down on there. Not so hard that you can never ever get it off again, but at least enough that it is firm. Line up the cotter pin's flat side against the flat side of the axle when you are putting it back in. Use the cotter pin press again, this time on the thick end. Push it through until you feel a lot of resistance. Tighten down the 10mm hex nut until there is some resistance, but not so hard that you strip the threading. Remember, cotter pins are made of a very soft metal, which means that the threads strip very easily. This is to secure the cotter pin in place. This should not be done to try to pull the cotter pin further into the crank, or else you will strip the threads. If you have any other questions, feel free to contact me on my Facebook page or through the YouTube channel.